Hey guys, in today's video I want to look briefly at one of the most common questions that I receive and sort of the factors that go into coming up with an answer that will make sense for anybody out there. So the question is, how does someone train in order to increase their muscle definition? Now, I want to break that down a little bit. So what is muscle definition? In its most basic terms, what it means is gaining muscle and losing body fat so that you have the appearance of being both muscular and lean at the same time. In terms of building muscle, there are a whole host of factors that go into both your ability and the rate at which you can build muscle. And then on the second side, the second part of the equation is leaning out or losing body fat. And again, there are a couple of factors that contribute to your ability to lose body fat and the rate at which you lose body fat. And then in the context of both of those, how should you go about it and at what rate should you aim to lose that body fat or gain that muscle, what's actually realistic. So for some of you watching the video, you may only be focused right now on either gaining some muscle or losing some body fat. And of course, there are going to be some of you out there who are, sort of trying to do both or need to do both. You need to drop your body fat levels down a bit so you can actually see the muscle. And at the same time, you're small enough that you want to add some more muscle as well before you get to the point where you're pretty happy with the amount of mass that you have. So that's going to be a little bit more tricky than tackling only losing body fat or only gaining muscle mass. If you do need to gain muscle as well as lose body fat, I'd suggest a couple things. Number one, set a realistic goal. Think about the steps you need to take in order to achieve that goal. Get to the point where you're happy with whatever of the two parameters it is, and then tackle the second one so that you get an overall better result. I'll try to keep this video as short as possible, so just let me know in the comment section if there are any of the specific factors that I'm going to go through that you want me to cover in detail in a later video. Okay, now for the challenge of building muscle. So there are a whole variety of factors that are going to go into your ability and the rate at which you build muscle. And of course, to make things really complicated, all these factors interact with each other to produce the sort of scenario where each of our careers in lifting and the trajectory that we take to get to sort of our ultimate physique or the best we can be is going to be unique and different from person to person, and that's what makes it challenging, and that's kind of what makes it fun as well. Unfortunately, a number of the factors associated with your ability to and the rate at which you're able to gain muscle are completely out of your control. The first among them being your sex. So it's pretty well recognized that males have a significant advantage over females in terms of ability and rate at which muscle growth occurs. The second is your age. So younger trainees tend to have a significant advantage as well over older trainees. However, that interacts as well with what's called your training age or the level of experience you have with weight training or with resistance training. And again, if you're new to resistance training, you're going to see the gains come much more quickly than someone who's more experienced, having been in the gym for maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years, or even longer. For older and more experienced trainees such as myself, it's going to become increasingly more important for you to not only vary the stimulus in terms of your exercise programming, but also to increase the volume as you accumulate that experience in order to realize incremental gains that are possible at the point of increasing experience. Other factors are somewhat or mostly within your control, and those are factors such as your nutrition, which if you're aiming to gain muscle, you need to recognize that for the most part, you need to be in caloric surplus. And if you're aiming to lose body fat, you generally need to be in caloric deficit. Another set of factors that are somewhat within your control are things like the quantity and quality of your sleep each night, alcohol consumption, to some extent your stress levels, and so on. So these are factors that, yes, you have great control over, but certainly are affected by external factors like family and career. There are definitely a number of factors that are almost entirely within your control, and this is where you should spend most of your time and exert most of your energy and effort, because you really have the ability now to program these variables to maximize the benefit that you're going to receive from your training career. And the first of these I already mentioned is nutrition. Yes, it's influenced by external factors including family life, the cost of food and what you're able to afford, and so on. But you really can exert a lot of control if you pay attention to what you eat, if you set aside time to meal prep, and you deliberately modify your behavior to ensure that you're eating as best as you can. There are a number of ways that you can put yourself in either caloric surplus or in a caloric deficit. But the way which I would recommend is, number one, understanding exactly what you're currently eating. So I'd recommend keeping a food diary or a food log. There are many apps out there that you can use to track your calories and your macros on your phone. So that's the approach I would take. Log that for about 7 weeks, 7 days. Have a sense of what your weight is doing over the course of those 7 days to see whether you're gaining weight or losing weight, and then look at your calories and macros, and then you'll be able to understand, well, have you been in a caloric surplus over that time period, in which case you would have gained some weight, and the opposite is true. If you had lost some weight, then maybe you were in a caloric deficit. And from, on average, how many calories you ate over the course of those 7 days, then you can figure out how to decrease your calories if you want to continue to lose weight, or how to increase your calories if you want to be able to gain weight and be in caloric surplus. And I'd recommend adjusting the calories pretty slowly, so a couple hundred calories per day, and seeing what that does to your weight and your physique over the course of a couple of weeks before making any further adjustments. While my general recommendation would be for you to focus on your nutrition in order to support body fat loss, there may be situations in which it's beneficial to add a little bit of cardio to burn a few extra calories per week, or a few extra 100 calories per week. But again, focus on your nutrition, use cardio only as a supporting force. Another factor that's almost entirely within your control is exercise execution. If you're going into the gym and you're just going through the motions of each of the exercises, you're almost certainly not obtaining the benefit that you could from each exercise. Pay attention to the way you set up for an exercise, and pay attention to whether the muscle that you're targeting is truly exerting the most effort, and maintain the tension on that muscle or that muscle group throughout the full range of motion of each exercise in order to maximize the benefit. Another factor that you can almost exclusively control is your programming. But this is an area where people tend to fall off the tracks a little bit and get confused. So questions arise, in terms of, well, should I be doing CrossFit? Should I be going towards strength training and powerlifting? Should I just, go into the gym and just sort of do what I feel like doing, work on what muscles aren't sore? And so this is a, real black box for many people. But if you take a very systematic approach to what you're doing and figuring out how to align your exercises and how to align your programming with your goals, you're gonna be better off. If your goal is hypertrophy, you really should be probably thinking about quote unquote hypertrophy style training. So the question is there a hypertrophy zone of training? And if it exists, what is it? Everyone's gonna stop and pause and ask the question, well, what training volume should I be using? How many times a week should I be training? How do I select exercises? Should I be performing supersets? If supersets, what exercises should we be pairing for those supersets? What about drop sets? What about rest pause sets? There's a whole range of training variables, and unfortunately they all interact with each other. And for better or worse, the scientific literature isn't gonna necessarily be that blueprint for you. Yes, there's a lot of evidence out there that can guide you in one direction or another depending on your specific circumstances. And to dive into the literature that surrounds each of those training variables and how they interact with each other would take a video that's hours long, so I'm not even gonna go there. What I will do is I'll take some of these individual training variables one by one, and in future videos I'm gonna dive into what the current literature says and put that in the context of previous understanding and what may be considered widely held belief. And then talk about how that can be applied to your situation moving forward. So having said that, I just gave a giant non-answer. So for anybody out there watching this thinking, well, now I've just wasted a couple minutes of my life and this guy hasn't given me any answers whatsoever, there is general advice to help you get started toward your goal of hypertrophy, toward your goal of muscle definition. The first is to just get started. Now that seems really obvious, but it really is the most important. It really is the first step. Decide on what you want to tackle first, whether you want to gain muscle mass or you want to lose body fat. Once you've made that decision, next step is thinking about your nutrition. If you want to prioritize gaining muscle mass, put yourself in a caloric surplus. If you're trying to lose body fat as your priority, put yourself in a caloric deficit. Now in both of those scenarios, number one, ensure that you're getting adequate protein in your diet. Number two, make sure that you're getting sufficient carbs as well as good fats. The third bit of advice is to train with intention. Now what does that mean? That means thinking about every part of your training program and executing that in alignment with your goal. So number one, take a step back and decide, well, how many days a week can you train? Then think about, for each of those sessions, how much time do you have available to train? And hopefully it's more than or just about an hour. Another part of training with intention is sort of keeping it simple. At least in the beginning, you really want to focus on more traditional movements. Don't overcomplicate things. Next, for each exercise, learn the correct setup and execution. Have an internal focus on your performing the exercise. Ensure that attention is really focused on the muscle group that you're intending to work and not on ancillary or stabilizing muscles necessarily. And of course, if you need help putting together a program, seek the input and guidance of someone who's further along in their lifting career than you are. And that might be a friend, that might be someone else at the gym, that might be a personal trainer, that might be an online coach. Whoever this person is, seek their input. Save time, save effort, work smart. Be sure to track your progress, and that can come in a variety of different flavors. So firstly, track it visually. You're aiming for an aesthetic look or an aesthetic outcome. Secondly, track items like your body weight or circumferential measurements of different body parts or body fat measurement. And it's important to note that, if you're looking at assessing your body fat from time to time, each of the methods associated with those measurements is going to be a little bit different. So try to keep it consistent. Try to keep not only the method consistent, but the measuring device consistent, or as consistent as you're able to, so that you can actually meaningfully make comparisons from one time period to the next. And finally, be patient. The process of building muscle really isn't an overnight phenomenon, or it isn't an overnight natural phenomenon. So be patient with yourself. Ensure that you're aligning all the factors of your nutrition and your training with your goal. Execute appropriately, fuel your workouts, track your progress, and then just be patient. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this particular video, but as I mentioned before, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be spending some time looking at the current body of scientific evidence surrounding each of the training variables that I briefly mentioned. Now, if you have a particular preference for a training variable or training variables, or a sequence in which you'd like to see the information presented, let me know by leaving a comment below. So stay tuned for that series of videos, but until then, if you found this video to be helpful, give it a thumbs up. And as always, be sure to subscribe to receive notifications for the future Hawaiian accent delivered fitness related content. And until then, aloha from Hawaii.